seems to be a little bit of concern about the question B tasks from what I'm hearing. So I said I'd do a little bit of a recap, a second one. And all I'm going to do now is look at the tasks that were set in 2018 and maybe have a little look at the some of the marking scheme instructions, and I might look at one sample answer. So we know that question Bs are creative writing tasks, but they're very much genre based. So remember, there are 5 language genres prescribed for study: argument, persuasion, narration, aesthetic language, and information. Information is the one that kind of goes across all of them. And the question Bs usually require you to show an awareness of, different aspects of one or more language genres. So let's have a quick look at the 3 questions that were asked in 2018. Here's the first one. Young people are often the recipients of unwanted advice. Write an open letter to all of those who have ever offered you unwanted advice. In your letter, you should identify some nuggets of unwanted advice you have received, describe your response to receiving such advice, and share your opinion on how and when advice should be appropriately offered. Your letter may be amusing or serious or both. For me, amusing can be great, but usually when people think they're being funny, they're not, and it can fall flat. But anyway, I avoid humour because I'm not very funny. What do we know? What do we notice about that? Well, we can see it's got a format. All these question Bs will have like a format. Here it's an open letter. Okay, so you have an audience. Everybody's ever offered you unwanted advice. You have to talk directly to that audience. And it's a letter, so you introduce it and you sign it off at the end. I don't think you need to put an address or a date on an open letter. You can if you want to. I don't think you'd have any marks deducted. But then within that format, then there's usually 3 or 4 tasks. Now the question Bs are only worth 40 marks this year as opposed to 50 in a normal year. But I still would expect there to be at least 3 elements to the task besides the format. So here you had to identify some nuggets of unwanted advice, and again they use that word nuggets to kind of suggest that it's that word is used kind of ironically there. A nugget is a lump of gold, but if it's unwanted advice, it might be people think it's good advice, but it's not really. You don't want it. It's the opposite to golden. So that would hint at the tone maybe of the piece. So you had to give some examples of, when people gave you unwanted advice. Then you had to, number 2, describe your response to that advice, how it impacted upon you, and then share your opinion on when and how such advice should be offered appropriately. So there's always 3 bits to a question B. So I've broken that down there, okay? So here's the marking scheme instruction for that question. Expect candidates to write an open letter to all those who have ever offered them unwanted advice. In the letter, they should identify some nuggets of unwanted advice they've received, describe their response, blah, blah, blah. It tells the examiner to allow for a broad interpretation of unwanted advice. In other words, you can play with the question. Don't be too worried about being wrong as long as you're on the key words and within reason. Dealing with those elements. And a range of approaches. Now, what does that mean, range of approaches? Well, it means there's no kind of right way to do it. There's loads of different ways to do it, but it's a letter and it has to have an audience and it has to have a certain tone and it has to be information based or anecdote based because you're giving examples of those nuggets, and it has to be opinionated, so you have an element of argument, a persuasive language in there. It then says in terms of purpose, you have to show understanding of genre and register. It has to be relevant and address all aspects of the question. One of the reasons that this section drives me mad is because people neglect one of those elements, and you're just going to lose key marks. So make sure you deal with all elements of the question, either throughout or separately in different paragraphs. Looking for freshness and originality, particularly in paper 1, particularly in composition, particularly in question B. Those creative writing tasks. You're looking for something that's not generic and not predictable or not formulaic. And you're looking for people to be able to write in a kind of a clear but also articulate fashion. So that was the first one. There's a model answer there. I won't bother looking at that now. Here's the second one. This was the second option, 2018. Don't forget to be 3 options. So the children in text 2 experience an unconventional education. Based on your experience of second level education, write an opinion piece suitable for a publication in a national newspaper in which you acknowledge what you see as the strengths of the education system of the education you have received, criticize what you see as its weaknesses, and make suggestions for its improvement. So that's a language of argument, task. It's an opinion piece, so it's a newspaper. Again, that's your framework for the question. So you give it a headline, give it a subheading, give it a byline. That means identify the name of the journalist maybe. But then it's looking for balance, so strengths and weaknesses. So if it was just strengths or just weaknesses, and that's bias, that's persuasion. But it's looking for balance and it's looking for reason, tone. So for me, I love that question. Actually, I really, really did like it. Again, allow for a range of approaches to the task. And then, understanding of genre. So that was language of argument, definitely, no doubt about it. It's for a newspaper, so the register should be relatively formal. I addressed all aspects of the question and so on and so forth. Coherence of delivery, you're always looking for your work to be, planned and organised and not repetitive and not, there has to be a sense of things being connected together, of continuity, and that's what management and sequencing of ideas means, and so on. And then there's the model answer on that. Now, did I look at the third one here? I did. So here was this was 2017. So those were the two from 2018. I like both of them, but the one I really fancied was this one, the opinion piece. So just show you an example of what I would regard as a H1 standard response to that. So it's an opinion piece. I would give it a headline, "We can do better than this." So you're immediately addressing your audience, but you're using a plural personal pronoun, which, as we know, is a very effective, persuasive, technique. And then you have your little subheading introducing your journalist as he approaches the dreaded first Wednesday in June. It's actually, in your case, the second Wednesday. Leaving Cert student Sean Delahunty reflects on his experiences of second level education. So a lovely, clever little touch at the start there, because that's what you get in newspaper. Go onto any newspaper website, and you have headlines, and then you have who's written the article, and then you have a little kind of tag line to kind of draw you in, so you click on it. So let's have a quick look here really quickly at this answer. It's that time of year again. Lovely punchy opening sentence. Exam season seems to bring out the neurotic in all of us. Again, lovely use of the plural personal pronoun, which is always a good thing. The media is hyped up about exam stress. Students all over the country are frantically trying to catch up on last-minute revision, and the parents of Ireland are quietly gnawing their fingernails to the quick as they watch on. Lovely example of imagery being used there to give a bit of colour to the quality of the writing. Trying their best to be supportive. 6 years of education, and it comes down to this, the famous Leaving Cert rite of passage. As one of the nearly 30,000 candidates about to sit this exam, I am nervous, but at the same time excited. I am excited to approach the next stage of my life and my education, and at the same time delighted to wave goodbye to our ridiculous, outdated and simply broken exam system. Now you see there, what you've got there is the introduction of some emotive language, and it goes to an opinion piece, and you're allowed to give an opinion in an opinion piece. Okay, so those are buzzwords. There's something to be ridiculous, that's a very strong term. Outdated, broken, those are all, they're very, very, very persuasive terms. I've had so many wonderful experiences. So you're given balance, because the question asked for balance. So you've got the bad, the exam system, but you've also got the wonderful experiences in second level education. However, the fact that success or failure is judged based on performance in a stuffy hall on a particular day is a farce. Again, the language is emotive there. Come on, people, we can do better. And again, you're using that kind of, plural personal pronoun, appealing to your audience, drawing them in. It's pretty good. And that's your little introduction designed to grab the attention. And then you're going to write 3 or 4, separate but connected paragraphs. It's an opinion piece. You talk about your own experiences. So positives and negatives. I love English, poetry, Shakespeare, Ibsen. The prescribed material is honestly interesting and thought-provoking. Look at that. That's the strengths. Okay. Interesting material. Education in the best possible way. Reading great writing has allowed me to explore the world through the eyes of others, allowed me to broaden my understanding of the complexities of the world, and appreciate the fact that writing is a craft, a skill with tools and techniques that can be learned, practiced and improved. And that's appealing to an English teacher who's going, yeah, well, that's exactly what you're meant to do. Brilliant. And you're giving your examples there. You're in a triadic structure, poetry, Shakespeare, Ibsen. You're showing that you've really learned. So those are the strengths. And now in the same paragraph, talking about English, you're going to balance it with the weaknesses of the system. And yet many of my classmates have decided to take the subject at ordinary level, not because they struggle at higher level, but because they cannot guarantee results and therefore precious points. So one of the most important subjects on the curriculum is ignored and devalued because of the extraordinary and ridiculous system. There's that good use of repetition there. You've said it's ridiculous and you're showing why in this paragraph. Surely we can all agree, this is a farcical situation, repetition again, surely we can all agree that we can do better. And that idea of we can do better, see it there, is a clever little link. It goes from the headline through to the end of the first paragraph, into the second paragraph, and it's just clever. And if you were reading it as, as a teacher or an examiner, you're going to read that and go, okay, well, here's somebody who understands, how to grab an audience's attention. That's very deliberate use of repetition. The word better, positive buzzword, we, inclusive language. It's an opinion piece. You're giving it to the audience. Okay, so that section was on English, strengths and weaknesses. Let's go to the next part. The focus on the point system is the most frustrating aspect of my experience of second level education, but it is by no means alone. I am sure every one of you reading this article can think of negative experiences, right? See that? I am sure every one of you reading this article, you're never forgetting the task. You're not wandering off. You're fully engaged in an imaginative way with the task. You're not a Leaving Cert student sitting in a hall writing about your education. You're a journalist writing a piece for a newspaper about education. And that's the kind of little thing that people forget when they're writing. They forget the task. So that's really good. I did an ad hoc survey of some of my friends. Ad hoc means improvised. And a survey, don't forget we talked about this loads of times. I mean, when you're writing in the language of argument, language of persuasion, you need evidence. So surveys or invented surveys are a great way to do it. I come up with this list. So what were the problems? Negative experiences in school, right? That's, again, relevant to the question. The weight of school bags, too many compulsory subjects at junior cycle, the fact that Irish is compulsory for almost everybody, the lack of consistency, in the quality of teaching, outdated uniform policies, the reliance on pen and paper in the digital era, the restricted subject choice at Leaving Cert level, the fact that fourth year can be an utter waste of time or a brilliant experience depending on what school you go to. We still don't have an effective system of continuous assessment. The myth that student councils are actually listened to. Now that's all really, really, really good. And I know it's kind of obvious, but presented in the list form like that, if it was in a newspaper article and it was an opinion piece, it's quite striking and it's quite detailed. And it's relevant to the to the question which asked about the strengths and weaknesses of the system. A long list, and I'm sure many of you are right now scrambling for the phone to email me your own list. Again, they're talking directly to the reader. Just because we are young people does not mean we are dumb people. Again, you can little mixture. This is language of argument, persuasive language coming into it as well. No system is perfect, but thinking about the last 6 years, there are so many simple tweaks that could be made to the system that would improve the experience of second level education for us all. And then that leads you into the third part of the question, which was how can we improve the system? Okay? So there's linking through the different sections of the answer. I don't want to be misunderstood as a representative of Generation Cotton Wool. Things are tough for every generation, but that doesn't mean that change should not come. And it certainly doesn't mean I haven't enjoyed my time in secondary school. Quite the opposite. Again, look, enjoyed my time in secondary school. The question required balance, and you're giving balance. Here you've given weaknesses, now you're giving positives. School tours to Italy and Sweden forged memories that will always make me smile. My PE teacher's kindness and understanding for those of us not blessed with the sporty instinct. Her willingness to experiment with and try new things until most of us found a sport we like. In my own case, she arranged for me to visit the Neptune Rowing Club in Chapel Izard when I was in third year, and I've developed what I hope to be a lifelong love of the sport. Lovely, it's an opinion piece, your experience, a lovely little anecdote thrown in there to give flesh, substance to the writing. Again, makes the writer feel human and relatable, and that's the kind of thing you want in any kind of opinion piece, a speech or an article. Okay, so we're nearly done. There's more detail there. The patience and understanding of our Leaving Cert maths teacher who built our confidence after a disastrous experience of the subject at junior cycle, putting in extra hours, sometimes getting frustrated, sometimes swearing he was giving up before returning the next day to try again. The walking tours of Dublin City that our third year history teacher insisted were more important than learning about who invented the steam engine, learning the names of the bridges over the Liffey, and researching who those bridges were named after and why they matter. And you see, all that stuff is, I know it's kind of long, but I'm trying to show you all that stuff you could put into an answer like this to give it, originality and freshness and make it lift above the ordinary. It's not all broad general statements. It's very specific and thoughtful and detailed and interesting. There's loads more examples there, okay? There are so many good things about our education system, so many strengths. I hope all of you are now scrambling just as quickly for the keyboard to email me examples of our own positive experiences. It's just such a shame that all this positivity, All of this learning, academic and social, gets funneled into this ridiculous, and there you have your lovely structure, because you mentioned at the beginning, 2 weeks which will define our success. Again, define, put in inverted commas to show it shouldn't. Just look at that last sentence. What a nonsense. We do so many things well, however, we can and must do better. So that's a very, very, very great way, or strong way to end the article, coming back to the title, giving it a sense of a circular structure. And then if you're doing any kind of published, article in a question B, or indeed in an essay composition, give some feedback option. That's part of the modern world now. If you want to respond to any of the points made in the article, please don't hesitate to join the conversation. #WeCanDoBetter, or follow the link to our Facebook page. So look, that's a long answer. But this year, let's see, how long is it? Longer than it should be. And that's really because of those examples that were given. So that's coming in at just about 1,000 words. So it's maybe, it could be edited down, but I know that sounds very long to you, but it's very, very thoughtful. And this year you will have the time to write an answer that bit longer. So maybe you're looking at about 700 to 800 words for your question B. I think 700 words is ideal. There's loads and loads of detail in there. I think that's a pretty good answer. So that gives you a sense of the type of things that you can be asked to do, and what we're looking for in terms of how to answer them. Look at your various question Bs over the next few days as you head up into the exam now next week. And remember, on the day of the exam, be careful, be thoughtful, think about the mode or the format of the task. If you're doing the question B, think about the language that you're required to use, the genre. Is it persuasive? Is it argument? Is it a mixture of both? Are you meant to use anecdotal evidence, and so on and so forth? Can you have an interesting opening? Does your engaging connect back to your beginning? Have you reread to make sure your work flows and doesn't have any clumsy sentences? There's loads and loads and loads of examples. So if you want another one of them, going through this one here, you can just let me know. But other than that, I'll finish now, and I hope you found that useful.